Welcome to Hello Therapy, a podcast to help you take charge of your mental health through evidence-based psychological tips and tools straight from the therapy room so that you can live life better. Do you wish there was a way to minimize the impact of difficult or distressing thoughts and worries? Today, I have a powerful psychological strategy rooted in acceptance and commitment therapy. It's called Defusion, and it's designed to help us manage difficult thoughts, especially the ones that fuel mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, and stress. I am your host, Dr. Liz White, a consultant clinical psychologist with over 20 years' experience in mental health. We all know how overwhelming our minds can get sometimes. Whether it's the constant worry of anxiety, the self-critical thoughts of depression, or the racing mind that comes with stress, it's easy to feel trapped by what our thoughts tell us. But here's the thing, thoughts are just words or images in our minds. Not truths, commands, or threats, although they can really feel like that. In today's episode, we're going to explore how cognitive fusion, the tendency to become overly attached to our thoughts, can make mental health challenges worse. Then I'm going to introduce diffusion, which helps us step back from our thoughts and see them for what they really are. Finally, we're going to dive into the Defusion Wheel, a practical tool I created myself that shows different techniques for unhooking from unhelpful thoughts so that we can regain control and focus on what matters most. So let's dive in. First, let's talk about cognitive fusion. This is a common mental process where we become hooked by our thoughts. It's like getting tangled in a web of self-talk, whether it's worries, negative predictions, self-criticism, or unrelenting shoulds. So for example, if you experience anxiety, you may have thoughts like, what if something goes wrong? Or I can't handle this. And those types of thoughts can feel all-consuming. If you experience depression, you might tell yourself, I'm not good enough, or nothing will ever get better. And in the case of stress, you may have thoughts like, I have too much to do, I'll never catch up. And these types of thoughts can really dominate our minds and dictate what we do. So when we're fused with these thoughts, we treat them as absolute truths or commands that we have to follow. And this leads to behaviours that may not help us, like avoiding certain situations, withdrawing from others, or overworking ourselves in the case of stress. Now here's where diffusion comes in. Diffusion is the practice of stepping back from our thoughts and seeing them for what they really are, just words or mental images. So instead of automatically believing or acting on thoughts like I'm not good enough or I'll fail, diffusion helps us notice these thoughts, acknowledge them, and choose how to respond. So for example, a thought like, I can't do this, becomes less about its content and more about observing it as a string of words. When we unhook from our thoughts, we create space to respond to challenges in ways that are more aligned with our values and our goals. To make this process easier, I created the Defusion Wheel, which we'll explore next. And I've put a free article on the Hello Therapy Substack if you want to check out the Defusion Wheel. And for paid subscribers, there is a downloadable handout to help you practice some of the diffusion strategies. So what is the Defusion Wheel? Well, it's a visual tool that organizes diffusion strategies into 3 categories. The first is observe and notice. The second is play with language. And the third is question yourself. So I'm going to walk you through these categories with their corresponding diffusion strategies that you can try at home. So first, let's take observe and notice. The first step in diffusion is learning to observe and notice your thoughts without getting caught up in them. And the first strategy within this category is my absolute favourite, where you stop, pause, notice, and name. So when a difficult thought shows up, try and stop what you're doing. So just take a pause, then take a deep breath and notice what your mind is saying. Is it a worry? Is it a self-criticism? Is it a negative prediction? Naming the thought like, here's an anxious thought, or here's a self-critical thought, can help you create some distance from it. The next way to observe and notice your thoughts is to picture them as pop-up ads on a computer screen. So, sometimes you do get those pop-up ads on certain blogs or even in your email sometimes. Now, you don't have to click on them or engage with them, do you? So just like with your thoughts, just notice that they've appeared and redirect your focus to something more meaningful or helpful, like the task at hand. The last diffusion technique within this category is balloons in the sky. And again, it's another favorite of mine. So often what I tell clients in therapy is to imagine that you have written your thought on a helium balloon and then visualize yourself letting go of the balloon and just watching it float away. And this is a really powerful visual for observing the thoughts in your mind. You don't need to grab onto the balloon. You can just observe the balloon and watch it drift away. And this visualization can be particularly calming when anxiety feels overwhelming. So the second category is play with language. Diffusion is also about breaking the power of thoughts by recognizing them as just words or sounds. So the first technique is say it slowly. So take a difficult thought and say it as slowly as possible. That's it. So maybe you could do this one now. So think of a thought that keeps popping up for you, but it's a thought that feels a bit difficult to have, or it doesn't make you feel very good. And what I want you to do is just to try saying that thought really, really slowly to yourself, or you can say it out loud if you want to. And just try that now, just for the next couple of seconds. How did you find that? When you slow it down, it becomes easier to see the thought as just language, not an absolute truth. So for example, if I have the thought, I am a failure, I would literally say to myself, I am a failure. And I might repeat that several times to get the full effect. The next strategy is repeat it quickly. So another option is to repeat the thought over and over and over quickly for about 30 to 60 seconds. And this can turn a thought like I'm not good enough into just a string of sounds, reducing its emotional impact. So I'll give you a flavour of what that's like. With the thought I'm not good enough, it would be something like I'm not good enough, 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 I'm not good enough. What happened to the sentence? It kind of just became a load of sounds, didn't it? So again, try this out at home and let me know what you think. The next strategy is sing your thoughts. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing, but this is just singing your thoughts to a well-known tune like Happy Birthday or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It might feel a bit silly when you're doing it, but it's a great way to take the sting out of distressing thoughts. And the last technique within play with language is to use a funny voice. So if you experience your thoughts as an internal voice, try imagine saying them in a silly voice. So like a cartoon character or an exaggerated accent or an accent from someone in a film, for example. And this just helps you see how sort of arbitrary and playful thoughts can really be. So the last category is question yourself. And this is about shifting from blindly believing your thoughts to questioning their usefulness. So the first strategy here is, what is my mind saying? Start by tuning in to yourself. So ask yourself, what is my mind saying right now? And this really simple question can help you notice thoughts without immediately reacting to them. The second technique is this thought helpful? So simply ask yourself, is this thought helping me? So for example, if you're thinking, I'm going to make a fool of myself during this presentation, consider whether that thought is useful or if it's just feeding your anxiety. I think we would all probably say that it's not helpful and it's not going to help you feel confident going into that presentation if you really buy into that. So if it's unhelpful, and difficult and distressing thoughts usually are, focus on what will help, like in the presentation example, preparing for it, practicing it, or seeking support. And the last technique is, if I buy into this thought, where will it lead me? Imagine fully believing your thought. So, for example, if you believe, I'll never get through this workload, where does that lead you? More stress? Perhaps avoidance? Now, consider what would happen if you stepped back from that thought and focused on one small manageable task instead. So it can be really helpful to just pause and literally ask yourself, if I buy into this thought, where will it go? Where will it lead me? And now onto the diffusion wheel. So the beauty of the diffusion wheel is that it's so flexible. There's no right way to use it. Some techniques might work better for anxiety, while others might resonate a bit more during moments of low mood or moments of stress. And the key is to experiment and find which technique works best for you. And the idea of the downloadable handout on Substack is that you can create your own personalized toolkit. So picking techniques from each category to help you unhook from difficult or unhelpful thoughts in different situations. And as I said, the link is in the show notes. So here are some final thoughts. Now, diffusion is a powerful tool for managing anxiety, depression, stress, and all sorts of mental health challenges. And by stepping back from difficult thoughts and seeing them for what they really are, you can reduce their emotional grip and take meaningful steps towards living a life aligned with your values. And the next point is really key. You don't have to control your thoughts to improve your mental health. The goal is to change your relationship with them. When you step back or unhook or don't buy into unhelpful thoughts, you create the space to respond with clarity, with compassion, and intention. Thanks for listening today. I do hope that you took something away from this episode. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hello Therapy. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and review. You can get more well-being and mental health tips by joining our email list and visiting the resources section of our website at harleyclinical.co.uk. The Hello Therapy podcast and the information provided by me, Dr. Liz White, is solely intended for information and educational purposes and does not constitute personalised advice. Please do reach out to your GP or a mental health professional if you need support. Until next time, take care of yourself.